The forest of Xylon 7 glowed like a sea of stars. Its bioluminescent plants pulsed in shades of blue and green, casting long, wavering shadows over the jagged crystal rocks that jutted from the ground. Mist curled around the roots of enormous trees, and the air smelled faintly of minerals and ozone. Commander Lyra moved carefully through the underbrush, her senses alert, her every movement calculated. She had been tracking a human and intruder through this alien world for several days now, and she had no intention of letting him escape. Lyra was part of the elite scouting unit of the Zathri, a race known across galaxies for their precision and discipline. Every member of her unit was trained from childhood to read the terrain, anticipate enemy actions, and neutralize threats before they could react. She had faced countless adversaries, rogue mercenaries, wild predators, and even rival alien factions. But the human was different. Unlike the others, he moved with a strange combination of caution and boldness, leaving barely a trace. The humans were thought of as primitive, barely able to survive in space, yet this one seemed to bend the rules of nature itself. Lyra crouched behind a crystal formation, her eyes scanning the glowing forest floor. Her multi-sensor visor flickered as it analyzed the surroundings, marking every movement. The human had been spotted here before. She could feel it, but he had vanished like smoke. Her tail twitched involuntarily, a sign of irritation. It was rare for a Zathri scout to be bested, even temporarily. She prided herself on her skill, and yet, the human had managed to stay one step ahead. The rustle of leaves drew her attention. A small creature, no larger than her hand, scampered across the rocks. Lyra exhaled quietly, lowering her hand from the grip of her plasma blaster. It wasn't the human, but the momentary distraction reminded her of the stakes. If the human reached the research facility, he could access information that the Zathri could never allow outsiders to have. The human had already demonstrated intelligence beyond what any Zathri would expect. He had bypassed security locks, disabled surveillance drones, and even manipulated alien technology in ways that seemed impossible. Lyra shook her head slightly. Every time she thought she understood his patterns, he changed them. Adapting faster than any of her previous opponents, Lyra moved forward cautiously, the crystals underfoot producing a soft chime with every step. Her mind was focused, cataloging every detail, the slight shifts in the mist, the broken branches, the faint scorch marks on the rocks. All of these were signs of human movement. Unlike most intruders, he did not panic or flee recklessly. He studied the environment, used it to his advantage, and left minimal evidence of his presence. The forest was vast, but she was confident she could find him. Hours passed as Lyra continued her pursuit. The light shifted, and the forest's colors deepened as the planet's twin moons rose into the sky. Shadows stretched and danced, creating illusions of movement. Lyra's visor adjusted, detecting subtle heat patterns that indicated life. Her sensors picked up the faint warmth of the human's body, though he was careful to mask it with devices scavenged from previous encounters. It was impressive, but she refused to underestimate him. Finally, she reached a clearing where the ground had been disturbed. Rocks were shifted, and the plants seemed to have been flattened. Lyra crouched low, her eyes scanning for more clues. There was a small device half buried in the soil, blinking intermittently. A human-made tracker. Her lips curled into a thin, sharp smile. This was it. He was close. The human had made a mistake. Perhaps he had been too confident, or perhaps he had wanted to be found. Either way, Lyra felt a surge of satisfaction. She moved silently, following the faint energy signature of the tracker. It led her deeper into the forest, to a narrow canyon where the crystal walls glowed faintly from the bioluminescent moss. The canyon was tight, forcing her to move carefully. One wrong step, and she could trigger a landslide or worse. Give away her position. She paused at the edge of the canyon, her senses alert for any sign of the human. Her heart beat steadily, a rhythm honed through years of training. The human was clever, but he was not invincible. Every creature had a pattern, and she was determined to learn his. Suddenly, the faintest movement caught her eyes shimmer along the canyon wall. Lyra's tail bristled. The human had left a diversion, something meant to distract or confuse her. She studied the pattern carefully, noting the slight inconsistency in the shadows. It was a clever trick, but she had been trained for this. Slowly, deliberately, she advanced, keeping her body low and her eyes sharp. The canyon narrowed further, forcing her to move in single file. Her sensors detected a faint heat signature ahead, and her muscles tensed. The human was near. Every instinct told her to prepare for confrontation, but something about the forest's stillness made her pause. The human wasn't just hiding. He was watching, learning, adapting. Lyra crouched behind a large crystal formation, listening. The wind whistled softly through the canyon, carrying faint echoes of movement. Then she heard it, a soft click, almost imperceptible. Her eyes widened as realization struck. The human was not in front of her. He was moving behind her. She spun around, her blaster raised, but there was nothing. The air shimmered slightly. A hint of heat and motion, and Lyra froze. The human had anticipated her every move, every thought. For the first time in her life, she felt a ripple of uncertainty. He was cleverer than she had imagined, faster and more adaptable than any opponent she had faced. Her tail twitched nervously, a rare display of emotion in a Zathari scout. She took a slow, careful step backward, scanning the shadows. The canyon seemed empty, yet she could feel his presence. It was as if the forest itself had become an extension of the human's mind. Lyra realized that she was not just tracking him. She was being tested. Every step, every breath, every calculation had been anticipated. Her mind raced. How had he managed this? Humans were supposed to be weak, primitive, and predictable. Yet here he was, a single human challenging one of the most skilled scouts of the Zathari. It was both infuriating and fascinating. Lyra had hunted creatures and enemies more dangerous than any human, yet none had ever made her feel this. Cautious, the canyon darkened as the moons climbed higher. Shadows stretched, flickering across the walls. Lyra's sensors picked up faint traces of energy, tiny disturbances in the air, barely visible. She crouched lower, moving silently, her eyes darting in every direction. The human had left signs, subtle hints, meant to be noticed only by someone as trained as she was. He was leading her somewhere. But where? Lyra followed the trail, her mind analyzing every possibility. The canyon twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the forest. Each step brought her closer to the human, yet he remained elusive, always just out of reach. It was a game of patience, strategy, and intellect, and Lyra was determined to win. Finally, she reached another clearing. The human was gone, but the signs were clear. A small gadget lay on a rock, its lights blinking in sequence. Lyra studied it carefully, realizing it was more than a simple trap. It was a message, a challenge. The human was telling her he was aware of her pursuit and he was confident. Lyra felt a thrill run through her. This was no ordinary opponent. This human was different. He was not just surviving. He was thinking, predicting, adapting, and that meant one thing. Capturing him would require every ounce of her skill. Every lesson she had learned, every instinct honed over years of training, she clenched her fists, her tail flicking with determination. The hunt was far from over, and she was ready. Somewhere in the forest, the human waited, and she would find him. The forest pulsed with light around her, and Lyra stepped forward into the shadows. The chase had begun, and neither hunter nor prey would back down. The forest of Xylon 7 seemed alive that night. Shadows shifted strangely under the twin moons, and the soft glow of bioluminescent plants created a strange, dreamlike landscape. Commander Lyra moved cautiously through the dense underbrush, her senses alert. Every sound, every movement, even the faintest shift in the air, could be a clue to the human's location. For days, she had been chasing him, and with each encounter, he grew more elusive. The humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, and unpredictable, but this one was different. Unlike any alien she had ever hunted, he seemed to think several steps ahead. He didn't just run or hide. He adapted, he created, and he left hints of his presence like breadcrumbs, but only for those clever enough to notice. Lyra crouched behind a glowing crystal, multi-sensor visor scanning the forest. The faint heat signature of the human flickered across her display, but it was irregular, shifting as if he knew she was tracking him. She took a careful step forward, mindful of the crystals that chimed softly under her weight. The human had already learned the terrain, exploiting it in ways she could not have predicted. Ahead, she noticed signs of disturbance in the forest floor. A broken vine, slightly scorched rocks, and flattened moss marked his path. Lyra leaned closer to examine a gadget half buried in the soil. It blinked faintly, its pattern irregular. She reached out, her claws brushing it gently. The device was clever, unlike anything she had seen before. It emitted a faint pulse that could confuse sensors. A trap designed to mislead even the most experienced hunter. Lyra's mind raced. The human had anticipated her movements, his ingenuity far beyond what her species considered possible for humans. He wasn't reckless. He didn't panic. Each of his actions was precise, deliberate, and clever. It was as if he were thinking in ways she could not fully understand, yet he left enough clues to challenge her intellect. Hours passed. Lyra moved quietly through the glowing forest, her senses attuned to every detail. Occasionally, she paused to study a clue, a small indentation in the rock, a faint heat signature, a gadget that seemed out of place. Each discovery confirmed what she already suspected: the human was not only surviving, he was mastering the environment. The canyon ahead narrowed, forcing her to move carefully. Every step made her more aware of her surroundings. The forest was alive with sounds, the soft whisper of wind through crystal formations, the chirping of small alien creatures, and the distant hum of energy from unknown sources. But among these sounds, Lyra could feel a rhythm, a pattern that hinted at the human's movements. She crouched low, her eyes scanning the shadows. Then, a small shimmer caught her attention. A faint reflection on a crystal wall, barely noticeable. Lyra froze, recognizing it immediately. The human had been here. He had left a subtle sign for her to follow her, perhaps to mislead her. Either way, she understood the challenge. Lyra followed the trail carefully. She noticed tiny scratches on the rocks, signs of improvised tools used by the human. There were energy readings that fluctuated in ways she had never encountered before. The human's presence was clever, indirect, and yet undeniably real. It was like he was speaking to her without words, daring her to find him. Suddenly, she heard a faint click behind her. Her tail twitched, and her claws scraped lightly against the rock as she spun around. The canyon seemed empty. She exhaled slowly, realizing once again how carefully the human had moved. He was already anticipating her thoughts, her reactions, and even her doubts. Lyra pressed forward, careful not to make a sound. She moved past a cluster of glowing mushrooms, their soft light casting odd shadows. There, she noticed more signs. Crushed leaves arranged in a deliberate pattern, faint markings etched into a rock surface. The human was clever. He could manipulate the environment to communicate or distract, all while remaining hidden. The canyon opened into a wider area where the ground sloped downward. Lyra paused, scanning for any sign of the human. Her visor detected a faint trail of energy, almost imperceptible. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, following the trail deeper into the forest. The human's tactics were clear. He wanted her to think she was leading. While he controlled the movement of the chase, Lyra reached a small clearing and crouched behind a fallen tree trunk. The human was not visible, but she could feel his presence. A small, blinking device lay on the ground, its lights flickering in a deliberate pattern. She picked it up carefully. It was another puzzle, a tiny machine designed to obscure the trail and test her observation skills. The human was teaching her, challenging her to think beyond her usual training. As she studied the device, Lyra's mind replayed the encounter she had had over the past days. Each trap, each subtle hint, each clever diversion, none had relied on brute force. Instead, they relied on intellect, adaptation, and observation. The human's methods were unlike any she had seen in the galaxy. It was humbling and yet exciting. Lyra knew the human was close. Her sensors picked up irregular heat patterns that shifted and changed, as if he were constantly moving. She adjusted her visor, focusing on the smallest details. A slight shimmer on a crystal wall caught her attention. She crept closer, her claws brushing against the soft moss, careful not to disturb a single sound. Then she saw it, a faint silhouette, barely visible against the glowing forest. Lyra's heart raced. She had spotted the human. But as she raised her blaster, the figure vanished. He had anticipated her every move. She exhaled slowly, a mix of frustration and admiration. Humans were supposed to be weak, yet this one had turned the forest into his advantage. Lyra moved cautiously, following the faint trail he left. Small gadgets, improvised traps, and subtle disturbances in the terrain marked his path. Each step told her more about him. He was observant, creative, and unafraid. He did not rely on strength or advanced weapons, he relied on his mind. And that made him dangerous in a way the Zathri had never experienced. Hours turned into night as Lyra continued her pursuit. The twin moons shone brightly, reflecting off the crystals and illuminating the forest in an ethereal glow. She felt a strange mix of excitement and tension. The hunt was no longer just a mission, it had become a test of skill, patience, and intellect. She was being challenged in ways she had never imagined. Finally, she reached a narrow pass where the forest grew dense and the light dimmed. Her sensors detected a faint heat signature, almost masked by the environment. She crouched low, moving carefully. Then she saw another device, blinking slowly. It was a signal, a clue, and perhaps a message. The human was clever. He wanted her to follow, but on his terms. Lyra studied the device carefully. She realized that he was teaching her something about thinking differently. Humans were underestimated by the Zathri, considered weak and predictable. Yet here he was, proving that intelligence, adaptability, and observation could surpass raw power. It was a lesson that Lyra would not forget. The forest around her was quiet now, almost unnervingly so. Lyra moved cautiously, sensing the human's presence even if she could not see him. He was there somewhere, watching, waiting. She had learned to respect his skills, but she could not allow admiration to cloud her judgment. The mission was clear. Find the human, understand his methods, prevent him from reaching the research facility. As she moved deeper into the forest, Lyra realized that the hunt had changed. It was no longer about capturing an intruder. It was about understanding a species that had long been underestimated. Humans were more than their appearance suggested. They were clever, adaptable, and resilient. And this one was the perfect example. The canyon twisted and turned, while shadows stretching and merging with the glowing forest. Lyra's eyes darted constantly, following faint clues and subtle signs. She could feel the human's presence in the air, a combination of anticipation and confidence. He was teaching her, challenging her, and proving that humans could survive and even thrive where others would fail. Lyra pressed forward, determination in every step. She had faced countless opponents, but none had made her feel this mixture of tension and respect. The human was elusive, clever, and unpredictable. He was a puzzle she was determined to solve, and she would. The forest of Xylan 7 seemed to hum with quiet energy. Crystal formations shimmered faintly under the twin moons, and bioluminescent vines twisted along the canyon walls, painting strange patterns in the shadows. Commander Lyra moved carefully, her claws brushing against the soft moss, her tail twitching in anticipation. The human had led her here with subtle signs, clever manipulations, and improvised gadgets. And now, she was ready to end the chase. Lyra had spent hours preparing. She had studied the terrain, analyzed the energy signatures, and planned a trap that would leave the human no room to escape. She was confident in her strategy. The canyon narrowed ahead, a perfect place to corner him. Crystals jutting from the walls would serve as both obstacles and vantage points, allowing her to anticipate his movements. The ground was covered in soft moss, perfect for detecting footprints. Her mind raced as she set the devices. Small, carefully positioned energy nets glimmered faintly in the shadows, designed to ensnare the human if he moved too quickly. Sensors were hidden behind rocks and vines, ready to detect the slightest heat signature. Lyra moved with precision, placing each piece of the trap exactly where it would be most effective. This was her strength: planning, predicting, and preparing. She had outsmarted countless foes before. Hours passed and the forest grew quieter. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of a small creature and the soft hum of distant energy. Lyra crouched behind a crystal formation, her eyes scanning the canyon. Her sensors flickered, detecting faint heat patterns that moved with unusual speed. The human was approaching. He appeared suddenly, stepping into the open with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Lyra held her breath, watching him carefully. He did not run. He did not panic. Instead, he studied the canyon, observing her traps with the same sharp intelligence she had seen before. The human's movements were deliberate. He examined each energy net and sensor, finding ways to bypass them without triggering a single alarm. Lyra felt a mix of frustration and admiration. His ingenuity was extraordinary. He moved like a shadow, weaving through her traps as if they were part of the forest itself. Lyra realized that this hunt was no longer about her plans. It was about his adaptation. The human was learning, anticipating her moves, and responding with intelligence she had not expected. Every device she had set, every calculation she had made, was being challenged by his quick thinking. She adjusted her strategy. Instead of relying solely on technology, she began to use the terrain itself. Rocks that could shift under pressure, crystal formations that reflected light to distract or confuse, and narrow pathways that would force him to slow down. She moved silently, a predator blending with the environment, ready to act the moment he made a mistake. The human paused near one of her sensors, studying it carefully. He reached out, not to disable it, but to observe it, to understand its purpose. Lyra watched him closely. She noticed the subtle way he analyzed patterns, the way his eyes moved from one detail to another, and the way he predicted outcomes. This human was not just clever, he was brilliant. He moved forward slowly, stepping lightly on the moss and rocks, leaving almost no trace. Lyra adjusted her position, keeping him in sight without revealing herself. She could feel the tension building, the anticipation of the final confrontation. The canyon was perfectly set for her trap, yet she knew it would take more than technology to catch him. The human paused at a narrow pass, where the canyon walls were close and the shadows deep. He seemed to sense something, tilting his head and scanning the area. Lyra's pulse quickened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She would strike, ending the chase once and for all. She moved forward, careful to remain hidden. Her claws scraped softly against the rock, the sound almost inaudible. She adjusted her blaster, ready to act the instant he stepped into the trap. Her tail twitched with anticipation. The human was clever, but she trusted her training. She could anticipate his actions almost. Suddenly, the human made a small movement, a faint shift in the shadows, almost imperceptible. Lyra froze, her heart racing. He had noticed something, perhaps a subtle disturbance in the moss, or the glint of one of her sensors. But instead of panicking, he smiled slightly. That small, confident smile told her everything she needed to know. He was in control of the situation. Lyra felt a ripple of doubt. This human was unlike any opponent she had faced. He was fast, intelligent, and fearless. Every step she took, he seemed to predict. Every device she had set, he seemed to understand and avoid. For the first time, she questioned whether her plan would succeed. She adjusted her approach. Instead of moving directly, she began to circle, using the canyon walls for cover and forcing him to move through areas where her traps would be most effective. Her mind worked quickly, calculating angles, distances, and possibilities. The hunt was a game of intellect as much as skill, and she was determined to win. The human paused again, this time near a crystal that pulsed with faint blue light. He crouched slightly, examining it as if he expected it to do something. Lyra realized that he was using the environment just as she had been learning from it, understanding it and adapting in real time. It was impressive. She took a careful step forward, adjusting her sensors to track him more accurately. Her blaster was ready, aimed at the spot where he would most likely appear. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the glowing plants casting long, flickering shadows across the canyon floor. Then, the unexpected happened. The human moved in a direction she had not predicted. He slipped past a sensor, avoiding detection entirely. Lyra's pulse quickened. He was clever, yes, but this level of adaptation was extraordinary. She realized that brute force, technology, or strict planning would not be enough. To catch him, she would need to think like him to anticipate the unexpected. The canyon grew narrower, and Lyra adjusted her movements, keeping low and silent. Her eyes scanned the shadows, her mind calculating possibilities. The human's path was irregular, yet deliberate. He was leading her somewhere. She could feel it. Every small device, every subtle change in the environment was part of his plan. Finally, she reached a point where the canyon opened slightly, forming a small clearing. The human was not visible, but the signs were clear. A faint trail in the moss, a small gadget blinking in sequence, and the subtle warmth of his body indicated he had just passed through. Lyra crouched, studying the area. He had moved quickly, yet carefully. Leaving evidence of his cleverness for her to follow, she realized something important. The human was teaching her, testing her, and challenging her assumptions. This was no ordinary chase. He was showing her that intelligence, adaptability, and careful observation could surpass even the most advanced technology and training. It was a lesson in humility, skill, and respect. Lyra adjusted her plan again. She would not rely solely on traps. Instead, she would use observation, anticipation, and creativity just as the human did. She set small indicators, subtle devices meant to track movement without alerting him, and positioned herself in a way that would give her a clear advantage when he appeared. Hours passed as the chase continued. The forest remained quiet, save for the occasional rustle of small creatures and the soft hum of distant energy. Lyra's mind never rested. She analyzed every detail, every shadow, every faint heat signature. The human had forced her to think differently, to adapt, and to trust her instincts as much as her technology. Then finally, she saw him. A faint silhouette moved near the edge of the clearing, light glinting off a small device in his hand. Lyra's heart raced. She moved carefully, positioning herself behind a crystal formation. Every muscle was tense, every sense alert. The final confrontation was near, but as she prepared to act, the human paused, crouching slightly as if he expected something. Lyra realized in that moment that the forest itself seemed to obey him. Every shadow, every shimmer of light, every subtle movement could be part of his strategy. He was more than clever. He was a master of adaptation, a mind capable of anticipating her every thought. Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. The hunt was far from over, but she had learned something important. The human was not just a target. He was a challenge, a teacher, and a mirror showing her the limits of her assumptions. To catch him, she would need more than skill. She would need to understand him, to anticipate him, and perhaps even respect him. The canyon pulsed with faint light as the twin moons rose higher, casting shadows that danced across the mossy floor. Lyra crouched low, ready to act at the perfect moment. She could feel the human's presence nearby, confident, intelligent, and unpredictable. The trap was set. The stage was ready. And yet Lyra knew that the final outcome would depend not on her strength, her training, or her technology, but on her ability to think like the human she hunted. The canyon of Xylan 7 grew darker as the twin moons climbed higher. Shadows stretched and twisted over the crystal-strewn ground, casting strange reflections across the mossy terrain. Commander Lyra crouched behind a jagged formation, her tail twitching with a mix of anticipation and caution. She had followed the human for days, tracking every move, analyzing every pattern. And now, finally, she sensed that the moment of confrontation had arrived. She adjusted her visor. Scanning the faint heat signatures and glimmers of movement ahead, there was no sign of panic in the human, only calm observation. He had led her through traps, gadgets, and diversions with ease, always anticipating her next move. Lyra's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, and unpredictable. Yet this one had repeatedly proven her assumptions wrong. Lyra's claws scraped softly against the moss as she shifted her position, moving carefully to gain a better vantage point. She spotted a faint silhouette ahead, a small figure blending with the shadows. Her heart quickened. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She raised her blaster slowly, aligning the sights, preparing for the confrontation. But the human did not flee. He did not panic. Instead, he remained still, almost relaxed, his eyes scanning the surroundings with quiet confidence. He seemed aware of her position without looking directly at it. Lyra felt a ripple of surprise. He knew she was there. This human had been leading her, teaching her, and now he was prepared for her final move. She stepped forward cautiously, her claws brushing against a crystal, producing a soft chime. The human's head tilted slightly, a small, knowing smile on his face. Lyra froze. He had anticipated that movement. She realized, with a mixture of frustration and admiration, that he had predicted her actions again. The hunter had become part of the hunted. The canyon walls narrowed, and Lyra had no choice but to advance. Every instinct screamed caution. The human had outsmarted her at every turn, yet she was determined to succeed. She adjusted her strategy, considering not only her weapons and traps, but also the subtle patterns of his behavior. He was clever, yes, but every human had limits. She just needed to find his. The human moved closer, his steps silent despite the uneven ground. He paused, observing her without fear. Lyra noticed the careful way he examined the terrain, the subtle adjustments he made to avoid detection, and the calm in his posture. He was not reckless. He was deliberate, intelligent, and confident. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped into the open, raising her blaster fully. "Stop," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I have been tracking you for days. Do not make any sudden moves." The human raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in a gesture of calm. "I am not your enemy," he said, his voice even and steady. "I only seek understanding. Nothing more." Lyra studied him carefully. His words seemed genuine, yet she could not let her guard down. Humans were unpredictable, and she had learned over the past days that underestimating them could be dangerous. Still, there was something in his demeanor, confidence, intelligence, and an unusual composure that made her pause. "You have evaded every trap I set," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with both frustration and admiration. "You anticipate my every move. How is that possible for a human?" He smiled faintly. "We survive by observing, adapting, and thinking ahead. You have taught me a lot too. Every move you make reveals something about you, and I learn from it." Lyra felt a strange mix of surprise and respect. This human was clever in ways that went beyond physical skill or technology. He was adaptable, perceptive, and capable of understanding patterns that many aliens could not. For the first time, she realized that her mission was more than a hunt. It was a test of intellect, patience, and humility. The canyon was silent except for the soft hum of energy and the occasional rustle of leaves. Lyra lowered her blaster slightly, though she did not fully relax. The human was still a potential threat, yet she could not ignore the respect she felt for his abilities. She had tracked countless opponents before, but none had challenged her mind and instincts like this one. "You are unlike any human I have ever encountered," she said, her tail flicking thoughtfully. "You are clever, resourceful, and fearless. Why are you here? Why risk so much?" The human looked around the canyon, his eyes reflecting the faint blue glow of the crystals. "I am here to learn, to understand, and to prove something. Humans are often underestimated, but we adapt. We survive. And sometimes we teach others even if they do not realize it at first." Lyra considered his words carefully. He spoke calmly, logically, and with confidence, yet there was a subtle challenge in his tone. He was not trying to fight her physically. He was demonstrating the power of human intellect, creativity, and adaptability. In that moment, she understood something profound. Humans could achieve remarkable things. Even among species far more advanced in technology or strength. She lowered her blaster fully. though she did not let her guard down completely. "You have proven that humans are clever," she said, "but there are consequences to your actions. You cannot simply move through my planet without risk. Why should I trust you now?" The human smiled, not arrogantly, but with quiet certainty. "Trust is earned, not demanded. I have not sought to harm anyone. I only wish to demonstrate that humans can adapt, think, and survive in ways that may seem impossible. If you observe carefully, you will see that my actions have caused no real harm." Lyra studied him closely. His confidence, his intelligence, and his composure were undeniable. She realized that she had been chasing not just an intruder, but a teacher. The human had led her through traps, distractions, and challenges, forcing her to think differently, anticipate, and adapt. In doing so, he had shown her the value of humility, patience, and observation. "You are clever," she admitted, her tail flicking slowly. "Perhaps more clever than I expected. But cleverness alone does not guarantee survival. Humans are fragile, limited in strength and speed. Why should I believe that you can truly match the challenges of this world?" The human took a step closer, his movements calm and deliberate. "Strength and speed are only part of survival," he said. "Observation, creativity, and adaptability matter just as much. You have seen it yourself, anticipated your traps, learned your patterns, and moved through your defenses without harming anyone. That is survival. That is intelligence. And it is what humans do best." Lyra felt a surge of respect she had never felt before. This human was not only clever, but also courageous, composed, and resourceful. He had turned her own skills and assumptions against her, yet he had done so without violence. He had demonstrated humanity's strength in a way that no weapon or technology could match. The canyon remained quiet, the glow of the crystals casting soft light across the forest floor. Lyra took a deep breath, her mind processing everything she had learned. This was more than a hunt. It was a lesson in strategy, observation, and respect. Humans were capable of remarkable things, and this one had proven it beyond doubt. "Understand," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "You have shown me that humans are not what we thought. You are clever, adaptable, and fearless. I cannot deny your skill. But there is still much I do not know." The human nodded, his expression calm and steady. "And there is much we can learn from each other," he said. "Humans are not just survivors. We are thinkers, creators, and adapters. You have seen that? Now, perhaps you can see that we are not so weak after all." Lyra lowered her blaster completely, a symbolic gesture of respect. She had tracked him, observed him, and prepared every trap she could. Yet in the end, it was his mind, his intelligence, and his courage that had prevailed. For the first time, she realized that strength was not always measured in weapons or physical skill, but in the ability to think, adapt, and anticipate. The human stepped slightly closer, still calm and confident. "We can work together," he said. "Not as hunter and prey, but as partners. There is much your people can learn from humans, and perhaps much we can learn from you as well." Lyra studied him closely, her mind racing. She had never encountered a human like this one who could outthink, outmaneuver, and challenge her so completely. And yet she felt a sense of hope, a possibility for understanding and collaboration. "You are unusual," she said finally, a small smile forming on her face. "But perhaps unusual is exactly what we need." The canyon seemed to breathe around them, the soft hum of energy and the glow of crystals filling the space. For the first time, the chase had ended, not in confrontation, but in understanding. Lyra had faced a human who had outsmarted her at every turn, and in doing so, had shown the true power of intelligence, adaptability, and courage. She lowered her weapon fully. And for the first time, she felt something new, respect. The human had not only survived, but had also taught her a lesson she would never forget. Humanity was clever, resilient, and adaptable, perhaps, in some ways. Stronger than the Zathri had ever imagined. The forest of Zalin 7 pulsed softly with light, reflecting the quiet moment of understanding. Commander Lyra and the human stood face to face, no longer hunter and prey, but two beings acknowledging the strength and potential in each other. The lesson was clear. Survival was not just about power or technology, it was about intelligence, adaptability, and respect. The forest of Xylon 7 was calm now, its glowing crystals casting soft, shimmering light across the mossy ground. Commander Lyra stood in the center of a small clearing, her blaster lowered, her eyes fixed on the human who had so carefully guided her through the canyon. The tension that had filled the past days had dissolved, replaced by a sense of understanding and respect. For the first time, Lyra realized that this encounter was not a test of power, but a test of perception, intellect, and courage. The human, standing just a few meters away, relaxed slightly, his movements calm but purposeful. He had not sought conflict, nor had he tried to deceive her for harm. Instead, every move he had made had been deliberate, challenging Lyra to think differently, to anticipate, and to adapt. In doing so, he had shown her the remarkable capabilities of his species. Humans were clever, adaptable, and resilient. More than that, they could think beyond the limits of what others considered possible. Lyra studied him carefully, noting the confidence in his posture, the calm in his expression, and the intelligence that radiated from every gesture. She had tracked countless intruders, faced countless adversaries, and yet none had ever forced her to rethink her own assumptions so completely. This human had not only survived, but had excelled in ways that defied expectation. And now, standing before him, she understood why the Zathri had underestimated humans for so long. "You've done more than survive," Lyra said quietly, her tail flicking thoughtfully. "You have shown me something I did not expect. Humans, you are cleverer than we ever imagined. You anticipate, adapt, and think in ways that are unusual, but effective." The human nodded, his calm smile reflecting understanding rather than arrogance. "We survive because we must," he said. "We learn from every challenge, every obstacle, and every opponent. Intelligence is our strength, adaptability is our weapon, and courage guides us. You have seen that firsthand." Lyra felt a ripple of admiration. Humans were often judged as weak and fragile, yet this one had proven otherwise. Strength, she realized, was not measured by muscles, weapons, or technology alone. True strength came from the mind, the ability to observe, to plan, to adapt, and to overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. This human had mastered all of those skills, and in doing so, redefined her understanding of his species. The forest around them pulsed softly with light, reflecting the quiet but profound moment. Lyra took a deep breath, her mind processing everything she had witnessed. The human had not only outsmarted her, but he had also taught her the importance of respect, humility, and perspective. She had been prepared to hunt, to capture, perhaps even to punish. Instead, she found herself confronted with intelligence and courage she could admire and learn from. "You have risked much to prove a point," she said. "Why? Why take such chances in a place so dangerous?" The human's eyes glimmered with a mix of curiosity and purpose. "Because humans are underestimated," he replied. "And we have something valuable to show, just our ability to survive, but our ability to think, adapt, and contribute. You see the world in one way, and we see it in another. When our perspectives meet, both sides can learn and grow." Lyra considered his words. He spoke with clarity, conviction, and a surprising depth of understanding. The idea that humans could not only survive but also teach others was extraordinary. The Zathri valued knowledge, skill, and discipline above all. Yet here was a species that had combined intellect, observation, and intuition in a way that rivaled even the most advanced aliens. She lowered her blaster fully, a gesture of acknowledgement and trust. "Then perhaps there is value in collaboration," she said slowly. "I have been trained to view humans as weak, limited, and yet here you stand, challenging every assumption. You are clever, resourceful, and fearless. If you can survive this forest, perhaps your species has a place in a larger universe than I imagined." The human smiled, a quiet and steady expression that reflected both humility and confidence. "We do not seek to dominate," he said. "We seek understanding, adaptation, and growth. We learn from every environment, every challenge, every interaction. That is our way. And if your species is willing, we can learn from you as well. Lyra felt a warmth of respect spread through her. This human had not only survived, but he had also elevated the encounter to a level of intellectual and moral understanding. He had turned what could have been a confrontation into a moment of insight, demonstrating the strengths of humanity in a way that could not be denied. You have changed my perspective, Lyra admitted. Humans are not what we thought. You are clever, inventive, and determined. Perhaps it is time to consider humans as partners rather than threats. Her voice was calm, yet it carried weight, a declaration of newfound understanding. The human nodded. That is all we asked, to be recognized for what we can do, to show our strengths, and to work together where possible. Humans are not perfect, but our greatest power lies in our ability to think, to adapt, and to grow. That is what sets us apart. Lyra studied him for a long moment. She could see the truth in his words. The human had faced danger, navigated complex terrain, avoided traps, and outsmarted her an elite Zathri scout. He had done so without violence, without coercion, and without harm. It was proof that humans possessed an extraordinary combination of intelligence, creativity, and courage. The forest around them seemed to pulse with a quiet, approving energy. Lyra took a step forward, closing the distance slightly, her eyes never leaving his. Then let us begin, she said. Not as hunter and prey, but as beings who can learn from one another. Show me what humans are capable of, not just in survival, but in thinking, adapting, and working alongside others. The human extended his hand, not as a threat, but as an invitation. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then extended her own. Their hands met in the middle, a gesture of mutual respect, understanding, and acknowledgement. In that moment, the forest itself seemed to recognize the significance of the encounter. Two species, once divided by assumptions and differences, now stood together in recognition of each other's strengths. You have earned my respect, Lyra said quietly. Not for your ability to evade me, but for your courage, your intellect, and your resilience. Humans, you are more than I imagined. You, the human replied, have earned mine. You have challenged me, taught me, and helped me show the true potential of humanity. Together, perhaps we can do even more. For the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself to relax. The chase was over. The lessons had been learned. The respect had been established. And the future uncertain, full of possibility, and filled with potentials, stretched before them like the glowing paths of Xylan Seven's forest. Lyra looked around, taking in the beauty of the canyon. The glowing crystals, the bioluminescent plants, and the soft mist curling around the forest floor. This world, once a place of tension and pursuit, now felt like a place of understanding and opportunity. The human had transformed what could have been a confrontation into a bridge of knowledge and respect. She turned her eyes back to him. There is much we can learn from each other, she said. I believe humans have a place in this universe, and I believe we can grow stronger by working together. The human nodded, his calm confidence unwavering. And we will, he said. Every challenge we face is an opportunity to learn. Every obstacle is a chance to improve. Together we can face anything if we observe, adapt, and trust in our strengths. Lyra felt a surge of pride, not just for herself but for the human standing before her. This encounter had proven that strength was not merely physical or technological. True strength came from courage, intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to understand others. Humans had shown all of these qualities, and in doing so, had earned the admiration of one of the most skilled scouts of the Zethari. The canyon remained quiet, the light of the twin moons casting soft reflections across the mossy floor. Commander Lyra and the humans stood together, no longer hunter and prey, but two beings united by respect, understanding, and the recognition of shared potential. You have changed my perspective forever, Lyra said softly. Humans are clever, resilient, and capable of incredible things. I will carry this lesson with me always. We, the human replied, will continue to grow, adapt, and show that humanity is more than what others expect. We are thinkers, learners, and survivors. And together, we can achieve even more. The forest pulsed softly around them, a quiet affirmation of their words. For the first time, the chase was truly over, and the future filled with promise, collaboration, and mutual respect was just beginning. Lyra and the human took a step forward together, leaving the clearing behind. The glow of Xylan 7's forest lit their path, a symbol of the new understanding they had forged. They had started as hunter and prey, adversary and intruder. But now, they walked side by side, united by respect, intellect, and the potential of what humanity could accomplish in the quiet of the glowing forest. One truth had become clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their courage, creativity, and intelligence could shine even in the most alien and dangerous environments. And in that moment, Lyra knew that the galaxy itself might someday see the strength of humanity in weapons or power, but in thought, adaptability, and the courage to face the unknown.